Hello, my friends. What's good? What's happening? Okay, we're going to talk about the music business. Oh, boy. Jon and I chatted a little bit last night and a little bit today about getting this topic. I'm going to bring him on right now. Jon's coming on. What's up, my friend?
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Keep going with your intro.
Yeah, so it seems like a whole lot of people want to know about the business of music. I was saying that, you and I chatted a little bit last night. We got lots and lots of questions, like 50 plus questions about how do I do with rates and managers and just all kinds of stuff about when do I do what? How does this work? How do you pay taxes? Like just all kinds of questions. And there's a lot of these questions that
just for election day purposes, yes, I pay taxes.
Pay your taxes. You and I both do a lot of things in the music industry, have done a lot of things, have a lot of experience, but it's almost like what a lot of people seem to need is like a proper class on the music industry. And I don't know what the resources are these days. I mean, we're going to do our best. There's a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of people who have a lot more authority than us about specific topics. But given the breadth of questions that we got, I think we'll just kind of wing it. And, I have some thoughts that will start out and then you can give some thoughts as well. I felt this way and I think you felt this way too. All of a sudden it's like, oh, we're going to be the authority for people on business. This is about to get crazy. This is not, it makes me a little bit nervous to realize that I think people don't have good resources for this stuff. When I was coming up, I mentioned this to you when we talked earlier, trying to prep for this a little bit, that there was this book by an attorney, Don Passman, All You Need to Know About the Music Business, that's like from the 90s, and they kept updating it. So when I was first starting out, like late 90s, early 2000s, I remember reading it as a teenager, and it had information on record deals and publishing deals and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The big challenge with the music industry now, or the business side, is that things are dramatically changing. And they seem to be changing quicker and quicker. So there's a lot of, people have specific questions like, when should I sign a publishing deal? Or how do I get my music out in the climate of 2020? And it's, there aren't good answers. Everybody's going to have a slightly different answer, because the music industry is really made up of a network of different roles that apply to different people at different times in their career, in different ways, for different projects. So I thought maybe it'd be worth, I'm not sure if it's worth starting out sort of giving each of our own personal history with the music business and business people.
There's a lot of ways in.
Yeah, I think
so what you just said.
Maybe it's worth just and I'm doing this a bit off the top. I feel a little unprepared. My mother's a teacher, my grandmother's a teacher, and I want to like put together a syllabus for having this conversation. But I think maybe we'll just kind of wing it. And I think this discussion is going to go over into other lives.
Sure.
Into next week. I'll answer questions in DMs. The answers to specific questions are just going to be different for different people. So maybe we'll give kind of a framework for how to think about this stuff, or how I think about it. I could be wrong about a bunch of it. But I just turned 37. I got paid to record a local band when I was 14. So I've got 2 decades plus of experience being in the music industry, for whatever that's worth. Over the course of my career, I've had 2 publishing deals, 4 different managers, 1 attorney team, but I started a record company. I used to run a studio. I've managed a band. I've consulted for a major record label. I've signed a writer. I have a little publishing entity. I've done a bit of everything, but there's still so much to learn and so much I don't know, and so much is changing so quickly that as much as I've done all these different things, I don't necessarily have a handle on what things are going to be like in 6 months, let alone now. I think one of the things that the big question for a lot of people is, how do I incorporate other business people into my life? The main question being a manager. But I think that all of us get into doing music without any business involved at all. Those of us that are making records, and maybe if you like went to Berklee School of Music or did some program for music business, then you work for a record company. It's a different thing. But those of us that started doing this for no money and then tried to figure out how to make money doing it, what business people generally, and this is lawyers, managers, publishers. We don't really deal with agents because we're not recording artists. Those are for appearances. There's specific laws for that, but it's basically attorneys, managers, and if you're a songwriter, publishers, and then accountants and business managers as well, but that's sort of a separate thing. The question of when do you get those people, I would, rather than answering it directly like that, and then you and I can talk about our individual experiences with it, think of your business. The unfortunate thing is all of us that get into this for a creative reason, you realize at a certain point you have to also be an entrepreneur. And what that means is you are the center of the business, and what these various people do, and they provide different roles, and we'll talk about that, is expand your ability to reach the business side or to do the mechanics of the business side of music. So an attorney, of course, is going to do legal contracts and things like that, but they're also going to potentially connect you with people that can get you work, potentially. That my first attorney ended up being my manager because I didn't really have enough going on to get a proper manager. And then at some point he was like, okay, there's enough work coming in, I'm going to link you with a bunch of managers. And then I started taking meetings. So shout out Jeffrey Light, who's been my attorney since I was a teenager. But an attorney is going to do legal things when you need them. And a manager is one of those people that they do a lot of things. They don't necessarily, each manager doesn't necessarily do all of them, but they will expand your reach. They will also take things off of your plate. So the idea of, when I was a teenager and recording bands in my basement for $10 or $15 an hour, I was interfacing sometimes with local managers, sometimes with the band directly. I'd do some kind of billing of some sort, maybe just like a little graphic design, print something up. But what a manager will ultimately do is be a buffer so that you don't have to negotiate deals and that sort of thing. You don't have to do the deals. You don't have to have the conversations with artists about money. You can stick to doing what you are there to do, which is make records. When you get into accountants and business managers, it's certainly important to keep track of your finances, pay taxes, those sort of things. A business manager was the last person on my team because that's someone that really takes over your whole financial life and alleviates that. I think most people don't need that. But manager is one of those terms that it means a lot of different things to different people. And I would say, a lot of different people are watching these streams. Some of them are from songwriters and artists to producers who do some songwriters, producers that are engineers, engineer producers, engineers that are mix engineers that get hired to mix on projects or mix a specific song, and then there's recording engineers who work in studios and have more of a consistent day rate or an hourly rate. And the need for a manager varies widely across that spectrum. There are songwriters I know that are very successful that don't have a proper manager. They have a publishing deal, they have an attorney, but they don't actually have a manager out there taking a percentage of what they do. And I would say same on the other side, that engineers who are working in a local recording studio or working for hire with day rates, you don't need to be giving 15 or 20% of your income away for a role that you may not need. When you get into producer world, and for someone like you, John, obviously, where you have big deals with major labels to do, every time, maybe people don't understand this, if you're a producer or a mix engineer at John's level, every time you work on a song that's going to get released, there is a contract. So you're going to need an attorney, probably a manager, in order to negotiate that stuff. But until you get to that point, you can do without it. I think the general rule that I would say is that when you get too busy doing something, you spend too much time doing something that isn't your central business, that's the time to think about getting another team member. Generally, I think for people who do what we do, and again, it's a wide spectrum, doesn't apply to everybody, the first person that most people need is an attorney, because again, if you're doing commercially released music that's going to be on Spotify with a record label, there is a contract that happens. And if you're not an attorney, you can't do it. You need somebody. And
there's 2 points to, hold on, let me just jump in there, because there's two points to the contract. One is if you're sharing in the copyright and getting a percentage, 1 point is 1%.
Yeah.
People hear the term point and don't understand what that is. It means
1%. We can go into that too. Yeah.
You know, or a work for hire. That means what I am paying you now is all that you are getting, and you have no ownership, no claim of ownership, and you don't have to approve any usage of said song. So that is the 2 possible deals that come across my desk. The majority of them are royalty deals, like 90+% are those at this point. But I don't think that, people argue me that should be a new standard for engineers. I think that should be a standard at a certain level of engineer. That I don't really know on the spectrum where that starts, but that's another conversation. Those are the 2 types of contracts you'll receive as an engineer and a producer. They're the same contracts. Normally I'm on the same contract as the producer. It's the same thing, and then my name is there as well. And it's the same contract as a producer for an engineer. It's copyright ownership contract. Somebody asked
in there, and we should definitely get into royalties and what that means. That's like a sort of an advanced level conversation, but we should definitely get there. I know. And actually, quick shout out, your Conversations, which you've been doing events for a long time, and obviously shut down the pandemic. Your Conversations podcast is now up. Long form podcast talking heavily about engineering, and they're great. The first 4 episodes are up. People should go check that out. If you haven't downloaded that, go do that. But I know you get into more in-depth conversations about more engineer specific lifestyle, business, all those sorts of things. Just how to think about that stuff, and the community you're building is really great. So for us, let's step back. Somebody asked in the comments, is a silly question, and it's not a silly question. That's the other thing I would say. Ask questions. Talk to your friends. Ask the stupid questions. The stupid questions are not stupid questions. If you don't know the answer to something, the only way to know the answer to it is to ask the question, ask the stupid question.
Yeah. And then the attorney has a law degree.
Yeah. So what's
the manager is really good at being social.
What the
social degrees.
The difference between an attorney and a manager is an attorney has a legal degree, and they are an expert. They are trained. They've gone to law school. They've passed the bar. They have legal expertise and can do contracts for you. A manager is a much wider spectrum. My manager for the last 8 years, a woman named Maria Egan, who's now head of music or something at Splice, still a very close friend of mine. She was at Pulse for a long time. She was my manager, and she was everything from negotiating deal points to connecting me with people, to advising me on what projects to take, helping me manage my time, managing my perception in the music industry. What do people think of me? Should I do a little bit more of this or a little bit less this? How should my relationship? She already knew this person. I'm going to have my first meeting with them, giving me advice on how to deal with them. Yeah, so business strategy, negotiations of deals, all kinds of stuff, helping you set up. When I consulted for Columbia Records for a while, she connected that first meeting. She had the relationship. So a manager is someone who basically, among other things, extends your relationships, manages your perception to other people, puts a buffer between you and business conversations. So again, you can just make records. They can do the business negotiations. If somebody's not paying you enough money, they can go be the bulldog. If somebody's not giving you your credits somewhere, they can go hunt them down and hammer them emails and phone calls, make sure credits happen. There's a lot of different roles, and there's no good answer on when you need a manager, but it is something that is extremely valuable. There is one. You already said it earlier. You need a manager when there's too much on your plate to handle both parts. Yeah. If you can't do the creative and the billing, or have zero interest in the billing and negotiations first off, then you need a manager. So I think it will behoove you to go through a substantial amount of the early part of your career not having a manager, to understand what these contracts look like, read like, and how to negotiate for yourself to a degree, be malleable on your rate to a degree, understand how to push back, understand how to say no yourself. And then
when your manager starts doing it for you, then you have these conversations together. I mean, there's not an agreement on a rate or anything that isn't first discussed with me from Nathaniel. Nathaniel Cochran is my manager. He hits me back. It's like, yo, this is what they got. They're offering, they can't do a point, but they're offering X more on a fee, or they can do a point, but they can't do the studio fee, or whatever it is. We have the conversation, then we come to agreement. If you don't even know what you want and what's a standard, what's your standard, what's an industry standard in your maybe your competition, then you're just kind of trusting someone else, which I think is good to a degree. I mean, I trust my manager wholeheartedly, but based on conversations that we've had, because I represented myself for so long. So I think that you know when you know, but you have to do it yourself to some degree. As an engineer, as an artist, I think get out, just get a manager right away. And that's a totally different side. So I don't even want to speak on that side because I'm not an artist.
Well, I know artists that just have an attorney initially, and then the attorney helps them link with managers. And you made a very good point that I was going to say earlier as well, a version of it that when choosing business people, when choosing to sign a deal, and oftentimes there are some managers that want to sign long-term deals. I've pretty much never done that. I've done most, and definitely with an attorney, you're never signing a long-term deal. Someone's just working for you. Yeah, working for you on a percentage as long as you need them. Things vary widely, but generally an attorney is going to take 5%. A manager takes between 15 and 20. And business manager, if you have someone just doing all of your accounting, all your taxes, dealing with your credit cards, getting money, paying commissions, this is 5% as well. Some people have those things. Some people adjust them slightly. Some people like to pay their lawyer hourly. But for us, there's just so much work that you don't want to deal with all that stuff. But getting back to what you said, when choosing business people, you want to have a relationship that you trust. That's the person you want to be able to have really honest, really uncomfortable conversations with, where if someone's not paying you or you think this should go this way, you're not sure what to do. You want to be able to have those kind of conversations with someone. So when picking business people, it's not just about your personal relationship, which is really important, but also how other people perceive them, because they're going to be out there representing you. I was listening to
huge.
I think it was maybe Brett Weinstein and Heather Hine. They're two evolutionary biologists that have a podcast. They talk about a lot of politics and things, but the evolutionary biology part is really, really interesting. Yeah. And there was a discussion about the function of gossip, and I think they were talking about it, and maybe read it as well in Sapiens, which is a great book. The function of gossip. You think of gossip as like teenage kids talking shit behind each other's back, but gossip has an evolutionary advantage, which is it's very easy to get invested in someone on a one-on-one basis and get a really good sense of them. That's really important. But you also have blind spots whenever you're dealing with someone one-on-one. So it's very important to get the opinions and the perceptions of the people around you. That's why, if you're dating somebody new or you have friends, you introduce people to the friend group and you get a different perception of who someone is. This is extremely important for business people, whether you have an attorney to an extent, but especially a manager, publisher. Talk to other people who deal with them, see what their perception is. I've done that with every manager. And my new manager, Milk and Honey, Peter and Lucas there, I talked to a lot of people, including Maria, my old manager, my publisher, my attorney. They gave me recommendations of who to meet, who to talk to, and to make sure that the people around you have good things to say about people you might be going into business with is super, super important, because essentially that's what they're doing. They're out there promoting you and representing you. So you want people to be perceived in a way that you want to be perceived to some extent. I mean, again, what a manager will ultimately do is take things off of your plate. So they'll be able to play hardball in a way that you might be uncomfortable. There's some great comments there. I love you, Sean. There's a lot of perception that happens with managers, and you really need to do your due diligence about how they're perceived around the music industry. It's a really important part of the process.
It's the most important part to me. I very intentionally did not want a manager that was known as a shark in town. like that word comes out like, oh, but he'll get you paid. It's like, well, do people want to work with him? Because they don't want to work with him. They might want to not want to work with me. And I want people to want to work with both of us. But I want him to be firm.
Right.
And I want him to be respected in that and not be a pushover. And same with me. I don't want to be a pushover. I'm a pretty nice guy. And I have been known to be more of a people pleaser back in my early days of this business. And I don't want to be like that anymore. And that's an intention in the last 4 or 5 years to kind of switch out of that and learn how to say no more. And that's why I'm so passionate about learning that as early as possible, because I learned it when I turned 29, 30, versus I wish I knew that and did that more when I was 22 and whatever. So we just learn from our mistakes necessarily, maybe not mistakes, but from our past in general. And I want my manager to be very, very similar in that sense. And I want him to strategize with me and be honest. And I want people to want to go have a drink or dinner with him. I want to have dinner with him and his family. I love his family. This stuff is that's more important to me than if I'm getting paid in a month or 3 months. If I'm getting 30 days or 90 days net is way less important to me than can I go to dinner and hug his daughter at 2 years old. That's way more important to me. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. I'm just expressing my point of view and what I value in humanity. And when you talked about the Sapiens thing and the Brett and Heather conversation, you're trying to find your village, right? So if it takes a village to do everything, it's the saying, it takes a village to make an album too. And I highly consider the people that are in my close village. Why would I do anything different? Why would any of us do anything different for our business people, the people that are connected to our money, connected to our finances? Maybe they don't have, like, my manager doesn't have my credit card, but maybe they do. Maybe at some levels they do. Yeah. And that means everything. So the personal trust and communication between that is the most important part. Their reputation. It's a huge part. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, a manager isn't necessarily the first person in your team that you get as you ascend in your career, but as you get to the place that Jon and I are at, the manager becomes the most important business person, because they're interfacing both with the deals you're doing, and they're your essentially right-hand person on strategy and career arc. And so getting someone that you trust, that knows you, that you feel like understands what you're doing, what you're trying to do, that you can have difficult conversations with, where something comes and here's a big bag of money, and you just go, this doesn't feel right to me, and they go, I support you because I'm here looking out for your career. You want someone who's going to be able to make that decision. And I give so much credit to Maria Egan, who again was my manager for 8 years. There were decisions I would not have made that led me to huge amounts of success, because she said, look, this strategically might make sense. It's going to take you 3 days, do this production, and then boom, 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 6 months later, I'm producing a One Direction single, and all of a sudden I'm a pop producer. I would not have made those decisions without this person knowing my personality, me trusting them pushing me to, and if I'd said, no, I don't want to do it, they don't have any power to push you, but you want someone who's going to, not go out there and do things you wouldn't do, or say things you wouldn't say, or represent you wrong. But you also don't want someone who's just going to wait till you tell them to do something. There's a balance for all these, and it depends on your personality, and it depends on where you are in your career.
Let's hit these two that are actually up on my screen right now before they go away, before I forget, because they're really important. Phil Barnes says, how often are both of your managers seeking out new work versus handling current work? That's really important, because for me, it's the latter, handling the workload, because my workload as a mixer is huge. I have 30 outstanding deals, because I'm working on singles for some artists, EPs for some artists, albums. There's so many deals that he's working on, and word of mouth is how I get work. Though that being said,
your work gets you work.
Yeah, my work gets me work. He is out there trying to connect a couple of dots on a couple of things. I very rarely ask, because I don't like to ask for projects in general. I want people to come work with me that want to work with me and kind of seek me out. But there's a couple that I think that maybe I'm not on the radar, but I would be a good fit. So I kind of task him with that kind of long-term, bigger picture projects that I just think that maybe the artist can go a different direction.
And
but mostly it's, please.
Let me jump on that from my perspective, which is again, the answer for all these things is it depends. That works exactly well with your workflow. There's other people who are at different places in their career or different roles that a manager is very much out there networking for you. And that may mean they're literally trying to get you gigs. And my managers have gotten that for me in the past, or they connect me with someone to have a meeting. So either like directly, hey, there's somebody looking for somebody to do this. I pitched you for it. Go take a meeting. But if you're earlier in your career, a lot of times what a manager is going to do is get your name out there. You know, John's work gets him work and my work gets me work because we've had records that have been on the radio or on the charts.
But it's always been that way.
It's always been that way.
That hasn't changed. This is what I'm saying.
Yes,
the work has always gotten the work. And Nathaniel or your new team can place you in the room with, for you, a co-producer, or for me, a producer, an executive producer of an album, and say, hey, y'all should get lunch and maybe work on a project together. But you're only going to work on that project if they think your work is appropriate.
Your managers will use your work and your reputation and enhance it and use that to connect you with people. I've had some very interesting meetings. Again, so I have a new manager right now, so we're getting into a new flow of like, okay, and I trust them and I like them, but the management relationship is such a dense, rich relationship that it's going to take many, many months, if not years, for us to settle in the way that I was with my previous manager, who I was with for almost a decade. The idea of, and even today, there's a record that I'm starting some work on, and I know the A&R person, I know the artist, I've already talked to the artist, I've got sessions, I'm going to do some production stuff. But this is the first time with my new management we've done a proper deal with this particular label. So the manager has already negotiated the points, but now we got to connect with the attorney. They're going to do the paperwork, make sure we get paid the right amount. And so I want to be more involved with this conversation because it's the first time we've done stuff together. Yep. And what I hope for and what I assume will happen is after the first couple of deals, I'll be able to trust more that they have a flow going, and then be able to hand it off to them, and then I can get back to spending more time making records. So again, that trust relationship.
It's trust. At this point, if someone reaches out to my email, my DM, text me, anything, I politely respond. Here's my manager's contact information. Excited to work together. I genuinely am, but I don't want to talk about that. So then, like you said in the first 5 minutes of this introduction, we want to be creative. We want to talk to the artists about the creative process. That's our job. Whether you're an engineer and you consider me a technician, which I partly am, I'm also part of the creative process. So we have to keep that language and drive deep into the creative language. Any business side of things gets in the way of that, whether you think it does, whether you're good at it or not. It gets in the way of the creative process. Simple as that. So the manager alleviates you from having to have those hard conversations that could stray off the path of the creative focused conversation.
And I think it's important to reinforce that, well, in something you said earlier, when you're starting out, learn how to have those conversations, learn how they're difficult, learn why they're difficult, because even when you get to our place, there's still times. There's another project I'm going to work on where it's a woman I've known for a long time. We've worked on records together. We've had cuts together. She's a writer, but now she's executive producing some amazing stuff. And she's asked me to come on. And in our conversation, because we're friends, she said, how much would you charge for something like this? And I go like, because it's an uncomfortable thing to be like, here's my rate, but if it's this, if it might be, like, all of a sudden I'm going into like, I'm talking to my friend about creative stuff, and then money happens. It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's never not going to be uncomfortable for the vast majority of us.
But your key point, right, what you just said, and I was going to add it to the conversation, is a little bit of advice, because we don't like to necessarily give full advice here. Yeah. The advice is, if you have to have that conversation, you don't have a manager, do it first.
Yeah.
And what you agree to, this is huge on my part as a mixer, I unlimited revisions till you guys either agree it's done or that you're not a good fit, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when you agree on a rate, that's it. None of this engineer stuff, like, you want that? It's going to take, like, get out of here. You said yes to a rate, do the work for that rate. And I'm sorry, but it's that period.
No, don't be sorry at all. Like, this is, and it turns out that and we've said this before, you're always going to do, some percentage of the time, you're going to do a lot more work than you signed up for.
Yes.
That's what it is. But if you're someone who doesn't do that extra work, you're not going to get hired again. Like I've done.
Imagine this conversation. You're mixer or production version 5, and the artist's like, oh, I got to recut the vocal. Oh, well, if you recut the vocal, then I have to recall the vocal, and then I'm gonna have to put it in. And okay, and the artist goes, okay, cool. I still want to put this new vocal in. You're still gonna put that vocal in if you want to be a part of it, and that's kind of what I mean. Is decide a fee that gives you a buffer on. Am I working for 4 hours or 2 days on it or a week on it with hour gaps? You have to understand your value. However you come up with that number can be. I think we talk about it on Conversations to a degree. We're working this out too. Like, okay, what is the minimum that you need to survive for X amount of time per song? That's your math. That has to do with your overhead, your lifestyle. And once you agree on it, don't make anybody feel bad for the fact that you agreed to do that. That's for that contract. That's for that conversation that you missed the opportunity in. And then you can learn for the next one on how to have that conversation or make a better deal for yourself in the future. Yeah,
definitely being... I'll give 2 quick examples. Actually, the current project which I mentioned that I'm the first one that I'm signed up for with a A&R guy that I know, with the new management and getting a new deal. We've agreed to terms. It's going to be exciting. We're gonna make some great records. I think one of the reasons I'm getting this gig, other than they like my work and I think I fit well for the project, is that I'd worked on something with the same A&R guy 2 years ago and spent weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks with a deal on the table on a particular song, working with this artist, and then it all fell apart. I didn't get paid. The song never came out, but I spent tons of time on it, but I didn't complain about it. It's like, that's the way things go. And I think, and I haven't talked directly with him about this, but the fact that I was pleasant to deal with, I go, hey, he was super apologetic. The deal fell apart. The label fell apart. Whole thing, everything fell apart. And I was just like, hey man, I've been in this game. This is the way these things go, and it's been fun. And let's go make some great shit next time. Having that experience of like everything's falling apart in his world, and I'm just like, hey, I just lost a bunch of money and didn't get this amazing song out, and it's part of the game. Let's move on. He's like, man, I could work with this guy under any circumstances.
Yeah, and let's add that, like a little coda to that would be, if everything is falling apart with this person all the time, then maybe that's not the right person. I recognize it was that way about.
Yeah, I recognize it was not his fault, but that's an important thing too. You gotta see your commitments through, especially when you're starting out. There's lots of flaky people. I mean, it's a tough business. The other thing I was going to say, I produced a song a while back where I produced and mixed, and they had an idea of going in with the artist and the label, what they wanted it to be like. I did a full production, full drums, did all the whole thing. And after 3 or 4 revisions on the production, they were like, maybe we just want it to be a ballad after all. And then we stripped everything back, did a few revisions on the ballad version. Song came out, everybody's psyched, delivered it. I didn't go like, oh, you want me to do a second production? It's just
just now before I got on with you, someone asked me to take a different approach of the vocal, and then we wound up going with the previously mastered from last night version of the song. They liked it better after hearing another approach. Like, I'm not complaining over here. I'm not getting upset about it. It's like, okay, cool. You want to hear this? Let's try it. It's always that, to a degree, and then that's why the coda makes sense. It's like, well, if you're always with in the same situation with these people, maybe that's not the best way. But look, this is the creative process, and pick and choose who you're going to offer these favors to, and pick and choose who you actually work with to begin with, because then this won't even come up as an issue. You'll be patient the whole time, and everybody's going to be thankful for it.
Let me so man, there's so many ways to go with this conversation. We're definitely gonna have more of these, because
we should pivot to the what you asked me. We should talk about the spec at some point too.
Okay, let's talk about
that might be a good one.
I want to give one suggestion for people. And I don't know if you've seen this, if you and I have talked about this, and I mentioned on a previous stream, everyone who's watching this should go watch the Neil Gaiman commencement speech from 2012. He gives this amazing commencement speech to an art college, and it's philosophically a whole lot of things that you and I both, and I'm going to speak for you, even though you haven't seen it, you and I both believe about being a creative person, dealing with capitalism, dealing with business and art. Neil Gaiman commencement speech, it's on YouTube. Go watch it. And one of the things which
link to it on Live with Matt Rad.
Oh, I'll link to it. Yeah. I'll figure it out. But Neil Gaiman commencement speech. One of the things he talks about in there, which leads us into this conversation of like when you should do things on spec. There's lots of questions about how do you get, and we can go into more specifics again about royalties and career arc, and maybe you and I will talk about our arcs or some of those things. I think it's valuable for people because there's no resource for it out there that I could find. But
wait, quick pause.
Yeah.
Hold that thought because Nadeem asked this twice, and it was one of the questions I wanted to touch on. Number of people on my manager's roster is 3. Producer duo group, hit songwriter producer Tyler Johnson, and me. So there's 3 on my team. You work with a bigger management house, so you're going to have a different answer to that.
Yeah, when I was with my last manager, it was me and 1 or 2 other clients. My manager before that, they had a few dozen clients, but they also had a few dozen managers. So it wasn't like my one manager was looking after dozens of people. My current situation, I actually don't know how, it's a company with maybe 20 employees. So the head of the company is Lucas, and then my guy is Peter. And I don't think Peter works with very many people specifically. So a lot of times the structure of a management company is there's a head of a company, and then you have your person. That can mean you have like a day-to-day person and you're interfacing with the main person, or you have within an umbrella company, there's like managers who have their 4 or 5 big clients and they all fit under a big roster. But generally, if the person you're interfacing with, you don't want to have dozens of people. It doesn't make any sense. You need someone who's going to pick up the phone every day. I mean, that's you want someone you have a personal relationship with.
Yeah. Cool. Jump back to what you were going to.
So one of the things in this Neil Gaiman thing is he talks about when to take jobs or turn down jobs, and he talks about your career arc or your life or your creative life as walking is going toward a mountain, and along the way you may have opportunities, and you got to decide, will that opportunity take you closer to the mountain or further away from the mountain? And that decision changes based on where you are in your career. So gigs that I would have taken 10 years ago, obviously very different than gigs I would take now. And that may change based on the project, based on what else you're working on at the time. Like continually defining your goals, what you're trying to achieve, where you're trying to end up, not just purely where you want to end up in your life financially or creatively or whatever, but also how those things are going to affect your day-to-day happiness. There are times when I've spent 14 hours a day, 6.5 days a week for a few years when I'm age 20 to 23, just grinding it out because that's what made sense to me. And I wanted to get in as much experience and do as much as possible, and my brain could handle it. And I was excited about it, but I would never do those kind of hours now because my lifestyle, it's just unhealthy for me and not fun for me. And there's other things I like, but so not just amount of time, but gigs that I would take because, hey, I am not in love with this song or this project, but I want to work for this person, and this is my in to it. So it gets in the question. A lot of people asked about spec. When do I do things on spec? Do I mix things on spec? Do I, let me pin Francesco's comment here. Pin comment. There's the Neil Gaiman. Thank you, Francesco. Francesco, who's out here editing the Live with Matt Rad.
Thanks, Francesco.
Doing clips. Shout out Francesco. Show him some love. Doing things on spec is a big part of our industry. I've definitely done many things on spec. I will say, as I told you when we were talking earlier, my ascension, my big moment getting into becoming a pop producer was doing a spec production on One Direction that ended up being a single, the song Best Song Ever. And I did it on spec because if I got it, I had a One Direction single. So fuck yeah, I'm going to do that, especially at that place in my career. These days, I'm not going to do really anything on spec, but you and I talked earlier, like if I get a call and they go, hey, this is Rihanna's first single from her highly anticipated next album, we haven't gotten the production right. Are you willing to spend a day on spec? Of course I'm willing to spend a day on spec.
Yes.
Partially just because I'm a fan, but yeah, if you get that right, if you solve that problem, then then that changes everything for someone's career. So doing things on spec selectively is a really important thing. I mean, you and I also talk about doing things for practice, where when early on, and I did this as well, you would get hired to mix a song, but you didn't have work for the rest of the week. So you just put everything at 0, take everything off, and mix it again just for practice. Mix it again. So the idea of getting repetitions in, proving yourself to people, doing things on spec, in principle can be a very, very important thing. However, this is one of the reasons why having a manager and people like that ultimately is very important, is it gives you a legitimacy and a buffer to where you can push to get fees for things, or you can at least get some studio time paid for, or those sort of things, without having to be a person that is constantly known for just like mixing for free. And if it works, great. By the way, and a very important distinction. A few people ask the question, do you mix things? Would you ever mix things for free? And yes, in a sense that like I may do a passion project or help friends of mine or something like that. But in terms of a professional thing, there's a big difference between mixing for free and mixing on spec. And just so people don't know, mixing on spec means I will do the work. You can then decide if you like it. And if you use it, you have to pay me. Yeah. Mixing for free is you don't get money, and don't do free. If you want to mix them for your friends, great. But if I mix 2 pro bono projects a year for friends. So yeah, think of it not as free, but as pro bono, which I think is, I don't know if it's actually a legal term ultimately, but they talk about doing pro bono work in the legal world, where you do free stuff for people who can't afford legal services. But pro bono meaning you're excited about doing something for no money because you love the project. But don't be mixing for free. Mixing on spec, producing on spec, working on things. Before you jump in, because I want to hear your thoughts on it too. A lot of people asked about writing songs and locking in production fees with artists, which is separate from the mixing process. If you're in a studio, I write songs with artists all the time. I do not get paid for my time. If they use the song, I get paid my fee. If the song comes out, I am by U.S. law an owner of the copyright, a part owner of the copyright, because we wrote a song together. If we make a recording together, I am a part owner of that master recording. So they cannot use those things without my approval, which involves paying me. But almost every writing session is not paid. So I write lots and lots of songs and do productions that I never get paid for, but that's because they don't get released. So that's an important distinction as well for people that don't understand it. But talk about spec a little bit. I think you probably have a similar perspective to me. Yeah, pretty similar. I'm just going to come at it another way. Please. You do spec until you don't do spec. At one point, you're not going to do spec anymore because people want you to do what you do. And even if they want to try you on a song and they want to try someone else as a mixer, they have to pay for both versions. Yeah. So at some point, spec really ends. I can think of 2 artists that I would do a spec attempt for, and the only reason I could think of doing it is because that artist has been using the same engineer for so long, and they might just want a different direction. And to make them sold on doing that, I probably, at my level, would offer that for 2 artists, and they'll remain nameless. There's no need to talk about that because whatever. So you do it as practice. And like Matt said, you're trying to prove yourself. So a new A&R that you meet at drinks or dinner out might want to try you on something, and you have nothing to show for it, but they just think you're cool. They're just not going to offer you $1,500 for a mix because you're cool, I don't think. I mean, they could theoretically because it's a major record label, but they have the leverage there. Yeah. And if you're confident and you believe in yourself and you're a good fit for this project, key point, pin it right here. Don't do a spec mix on something that you're not the right fit for because you just want the opportunity. Do the spec for something you can kill, so you're not wasting anybody's time. I've done that and failed. And it fails every time. Yeah. Do it for the one, take your pick on the ones that you know that you're going to kill it. So then the next time, they're not coming back to you for spec. They're coming back to you. So the strategic spec is what I would try to pinpoint right there. Because I don't think anybody is too good for spec. I think at some point you're too busy for spec. And that's kind of the all I have to say on that. You just become too busy for it. But yeah, the idea of proving yourself to people by doing great work, I mean, that's a big part of all of this conversation, whether it's finding managers, finding attorneys, doing spec things, how to set your rates, all that kind of stuff. it's not the main point of all of it, but it all connects into, you got to do great work, and that's what's going to get you work in the future. That's what's going to get you paid. That's what's going to, if you do great work and then you have a hit, then you'll be able to get, and if you never got a royalty before, then you'll have royalty after that. Cause you can go,
I mean,
this is how big my shit is.
Your One Direction story is great. And my version of that story is, actually it's a pretty good story. I'll use 3 or 4 minutes to tell it, but I was taking a break from mixing, and I was doing I just got signed to a publishing deal, and I was doing a lot of writing sessions, and I was writing with a friend of mine that I used to write a lot with, and this new guy from Seattle that goes by Budo, Josh, who's become a friend since then. And we made like a very mediocre trap beat. Him and I laugh about this at this point. A year after that session, not even remembering that this guy would remember who I was, I remembered him because we got on really well. Yeah. But he calls me and he goes, "Yo, I got a project, an indie artist I'm working with from Seattle, and kind of want to know if you do a spec mix. I remember you mixed, and I liked your vibe in the room and how you made my beat sound. Like, would you be down?" And I was like, I don't really do that. He goes, "Oh, by the way, the indie artist is Macklemore and Ryan Lewis." And I was like, "Oh, that's hilarious. You consider them indie, even though they have a diamond record." And they're so indie, and you know, they both become friends, and Ryan is an exceptionally close friend. And they threw a song at me, and they threw it at 3 people, I believe, maybe 4, on spec. And I did it, and I got the whole album, which had hits on it, and it was a great opportunity for me. And what it did for me, more than having a hit or getting a plaque or any of that kind of material accolade success, is it afforded me the confidence to take all the money I made from that and move out of Tony Monserrati's studio, my mentor, and start my studio, because I had the confidence that I could deliver an album at that level with hit songs on it. And that was streaming well and had this kind of level of success that I did solely without Tony listening through and giving me ears and saying, "Yeah, that's tight." It was 21 songs or something ridiculous on that album, and I did it myself with the 2 of them, with the 3 of them, with Josh, obviously, sorry. And that gave me the confidence to say, "Oh, it's time to go on your own and do this." And that spec project wrote that story for the next. Yep. I'm still in that story, to be honest. It's since I moved out of there to this gift shop space downtown. And that's the story that started it, and it was a spec. And your story is very similar. That One Direction song opened up so many more doors, and you did it on spec. So let's let it be known that I think that's probably a paralleled story from a lot of people at our level, that they have that, "Oh, I did that because I thought I was going to be a good fit for it, and then it worked out, and now I'm hired for 5 years." You know, so that's important.
Definitely, from a conceptual standpoint, it doesn't apply to everything all the time, but take shots when you have. Yeah. You know, shoot or shoot, as they say. Like, if you got a shot to jump up a level by doing a spec mix, go do that shit. Like, get in and if you have the confidence that the stuff you're doing is great and the right fit for a project, go do it. Go take care of it. We've got about 10 minutes left. I know we didn't get into there's a lot of specific questions. There's a lot of questions about publishing as well, which I think we'll probably save for another one. Maybe I think I might try to do a live with another producer or maybe a publisher and attorney and talk more about publishing deals, because I know, even though John's a great writer and producer, I know you don't necessarily want to get deep into that.
I'm not in that game right now.
But I'll hit some people back in DMs, but that's an important conversation. But I think the short answer to the publishing thing is it's very similar to generally how we're talking about this. When you get to the point where you are too busy or have too much on your plate, and you there's things you know that you're either missing or you're close to grabbing, and a manager or a publisher or somebody like that will help you. I mean, there's also financial considerations, so we'll talk about publishing separately, but like thinking about things as like what's going to advance you to that next stage, not like sign a record deal because artists sign record deals, or sign a publishing deal because people sign publishing deals. But if you're near to that next step, and you get the impression, or you have the understanding that having a manager or having an attorney is going to alleviate something or make you like, that's the time to make those decisions for sure. I wonder, we got 10 minutes. Maybe we'll just do a quick, I can do a few minutes on my arc with business people. If you want to do the same, you can, or you can chime in. and just a bit of how I started out, because I think it'll be useful for people to hear the different places that I've been and how I've thought about them. So I started in bands and producing hip hop records when I was a teenager, and I had my parents' basement that was just the place where everybody congregated. And most of the stuff I did, people weren't paying me. It was just me and my friends making stuff, whether it was bands, we were putting on local shows. I was producing rappers. So I was making beats and recording them, writing hooks, singing things. This is all like pre-computer as well. So it was like beat machines and recording live drums in a basement. But I started making enough things. Again, the conversation of your work gets you work. I'd recorded some local bands, and then some additional bands and additional people said, hey, we like what you did with these guys. What do you charge? And I went, oh, I should probably charge something to these people. So yeah, I was project by project. Some things I didn't get paid much. Most things I didn't get paid at all. But I started charging hourly for some people, charging like 10, 15 bucks an hour. Sometimes I would get hired to produce a song. And then once I came after high school, I moved down to Los Angeles. And some of those recordings, including this band The Matches and this band Streets of Nowhere, started getting attention in LA, and I started meeting people, and they picked me up from my dorm room in Westwood and take me to their meetings. And so I got to meet record label people. I got to go hang out at Rick Rubin's house. I got to meet all these different people, and I met Eric Valentine, and he had his studio Barefoot, which I believe just sold in Hollywood. And he it wasn't a commercial studio. He was just a producer, but I was such a big fan of his records, Third Eye Blind and Smash Mouth and Good Charlotte. Those are a lot of the models of the rock stuff that I was doing. And so I just said, hey, I would do anything. I'd sweep your floors. I'd do whatever you want. And he said, we don't have really a full-time staff. So just keep in touch. Sometimes we hire extra people. So I think I said this on a previous stream. I called him every 2 weeks for like 6 months, just because he's told me to keep in touch with him. He gave me his number, so I wasn't overly bothersome about it. But I just called him every couple of weeks and just check in. And ultimately, he hired me as an assistant for a project. Getting paid like $7 an hour. I thought it was going to be for free, but it turned out I got paid. And at the same time, I was producing bands on the side. So I had like the sort of day job engineer. Really was just an assistant job. I was wrapping cables and getting in people's way. And then I was also continuing to produce bands outside of that. What's up, Sean, in the chat there, Sean, the singer of The Matches, and Maniac, amazing artist, dear friend for years and years. Still working on Matches stuff, still working on other things. They ended up signing a deal. And at that point, I needed an attorney. So I didn't have any business people up until that point other than friends and local band managers I knew, but I didn't have anybody representing me. And I was already working for Eric, but once I had a deal to be done, because The Matches signed a record deal, I needed an attorney to do the deal because I was a part owner in the recordings because I'd produced some of the record. So at that point, I got connected with Eric's attorney, Jeffrey Light. I was 19 or 20 at the time. And he did my first deal. He wasn't my first full-time attorney because I didn't have any other work, but he helped me on this one deal. And then as soon as I started getting some other things and other bands and other recordings that were getting attention and getting signed, I started utilizing him more and more. Again, I didn't have a manager. He sort of acted as my de facto manager. But then at the point when I had enough work coming at me after I started to move on from working for Eric, I needed someone to really deal with the flow and deal with a sort of a full-on production schedule. And that's when my attorney connected me with a bunch of managers to meet. I picked a manager, Jeremiah Grauber, great manager. He managed Jakir King at the time, Ethan Johns, these great like rock record makers. I was with them for a number of years, but I wasn't writing at the time, didn't have a publishing deal. So I had an attorney and a manager. And then I started doing some writing. Jeremiah pushed me in to do some writing and wrote a song with Andy Grammer that started to get some attention that was going to come out. And all of a sudden I had publishers coming after me. I didn't really understand publishing. So once I kind of looked around the landscape, I was like, okay, if I want to do this pop writing thing, I think I need another manager that lives more in that space. So before I signed a publishing deal, I parted ways with my manager at the time and linked up with Maria Egan, and then signed a publishing deal from there. And this I'm just giving the story to sort of give the arc of how I came to be in this situation. But so I had nobody for a long time, then an attorney, then a manager to manage the production side, then when I moved into pop world, I got a different manager, signed a publishing deal. I've subsequently finished that publishing deal, signed another publishing deal with Downtown. I got a business manager at a certain point when I was doing my taxes and doing my expenses and realizing I was spending like 5 days going through receipts. That was the point. It was like, okay, I should pay someone to do this for me. So at every step of the way, it was, okay, I need somebody to help me with this because I can't do it myself. I'm trying to do it myself, which is what we talked about. It's important for you to get comfortable as you can, doing uncomfortable things in business, so that at the point when you really can't do it, you know what needs to be done, and you can get someone involved who you really trust with it. Yeah, there's my monologue of my whole arc. So you got thoughts? You want to give a little bit of?
Mine's too long to hit in 4 minutes, but it's similar to yours to a degree, and it's just it would sound a bit like a repeat until the end.
But it's important for people to understand that there are different ways that this happens. There are different arcs. There are people who come in as artists and then they transition to being record makers. There's people who start out as engineers and then they become mixers and then they become producers. There's all kinds of directions for this sort of thing, and it's really about, more than anything else, I think, talking to the people around you, getting an understanding of what other people are doing. That's part of the reason we're trying to do this, is to just say, here's what I've done, here's how I think about it. John, what do you think? You say something different. And these kind of conversations are supremely important. That function of gossip, as we talked about.
Yeah, the common denominator, though, the point that it flips to, you're constantly working on things that you want to be working on, is when someone says, oh, that one thing you did, that was tight, I want that. And not that they want that exactly. Sometimes they pretend like they want that exactly, and it never is. This is no such thing as exactly the other thing, because it can't be, because it's only been that way. And that's the key. For me, it was someone heard one project. Long story short, I ran a studio like you, Long Island, New York, for 5 years. Did a lot of indie bands. One of my best friends, we made pop music together. He found a manager through making pop music. It was the first time I dove into pop music. His manager happened to be Tony Maserati's manager. She introduced me to Tony Maserati. We played the music. Tony goes, oh, that shit sounds good. You did that? You made that sound like that? Why don't you come work with me? Way long story short. But he heard a pop thing that I did out of hundreds of other things that I did. It was like, that sounds clean. I can work with that. Let this kid come work with me. And then gave me other opportunities that then turned into the Downtown story that I mentioned earlier about doing a song on spec with Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, and then kind of opening the door to what's now, where I'm kind of running my own mix business with 2 people underneath me. I've had another very successful engineer that went on to work with Jeff Basker and kind of been training. So I now kind of have an engineer workplace to a degree, where I'm trying to train proteges and apprentices and come out the other end. And that was a decision that I made because that's how Tony ran his business. So to become an entrepreneur was not my dream, and it still isn't my dream. So on a very small scale, I am offering training to engineers that I pay along the way. There's no free work, and then they'll gain something from it so they can start their own mix business at some point. And if I do some sort of umbrella mixing, maybe later in my life, maybe in the next 10 years or so, that could be a possibility. But that would only come from my time learning from Tony and how that even makes sense to do.
Well, you said something important that made me realize that I should point it out as well. The idea of your work getting you work, you've said that a bunch of times. You've said it more than I have, and it's more important than I give it credit for. It is hugely, hugely important to do great work, because why did Eric Valentine let me bother him for 6 months and then finally hire me? He liked the Matches record. Why did I get the One Direction gig? Because I'd done something else for a different A&R guy. Why did that different A&R guy hire me? He liked the stuff I did with Eric. Like, there's a chain of events and all this stuff that, why did I work on the Matches stuff? Because there was another local band that was my friend Dave, and we made some stuff together, and they were like, we like that EP, we'd like to hire you or have you come produce stuff. Their manager. It's your work gets you work.
Let's, with that context, and I love that the sentence has been said like that, but let's actually add one more level to it, where that's not work. The work gets you work, but we didn't do that because we wanted to work. We did that because we wanted to create. We wanted to make art or be a part of someone else's art that became partly our art. We called it work because that's our career, But for me, and I'm sure for you too, it started as a hobby. I didn't get, like, you started your store. You didn't get paid right away.
Start out as love. Like, I couldn't stop.
Yeah,
myself.
love. I didn't get paid for the first 5 years. I made no money. My studio that my dad owned, him and I built it. So he paid for the studio. I just built it with our bare hands. He took all the money. I didn't make any money at that time. Like maybe $25 to grab some Subway down the street, or like Mamoon's Falafel on a city night. Like there was no money being made. It wasn't up until like 5 years ago there was money being made. So we didn't work. I don't want to call it work. I don't work today. After this, I'm going to go ride my bike quick, and then I'm going to work. I'm not working. I like what I'm working on. It's not like I still don't really feel like it's work all the time. Yeah. Sometimes it definitely does. And that's okay. You deep breathe and you allow that to be, because it is still work. It is still your job. But I don't want to call it that. Oh, shout out to Mamoon's on there. Nice.
Well, you're absolutely right, and this is perfect. We can do it on the last thought. Watch that Neil Gaiman video that's linked, the pinned right there, because he talks about that in one of there's a million great quotes from it, and by a million I mean 35 or so. Great little quotes, great little things about how to think about being a creative person. One of the things he said, I don't know if it's true for everyone else, but it's been true for me. Anything I ever did creatively that was only for the money, never worked out. Never worked out.
Let's end on that.
Yeah, let's end on that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. There's lots more specific questions about all kinds of stuff. We can get to that next week. Hit us up, DM me. I'm going to hit a bunch of you guys back. Thank you so much for asking all the questions. Hopefully it was useful. Appreciate you guys. And we'll see you next week.
And good luck, America.
Peace.
Peace.